When a legendary Hollywood icon meets a homeless man on the streets of Los Angeles, he realizes it's his long-lost friend and fellow veteran. What happens next will restore your faith in humanity and remind us what true American values are all about. Before we dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. I love hearing from all corners of our great nation. The California sun was setting over Los Angeles when Clint Eastwood finished another long day of directing. At 93, most people would have been home resting, but not Clint. That's not who he is. That's not who he's ever been. Not since his days as a young swimming instructor at Fort Ord during the Korean War, where he first learned what it meant to serve something greater than himself. As he drove down Sunset Boulevard, something caught his eye, or rather, a homeless man struggling with a worn military duffel bag. His weathered hands showed the unmistakable discipline of military training, even in distress. There was something familiar about those hands, about the way the man carried himself despite his circumstances. Clint had seen thousands of faces throughout his career, but this one struck a chord deep within his memory. The man turned slightly, and in that moment, Clint's heart nearly stopped. Behind the unkempt beard and weathered face were the unmistakable features of Jim Morrison. Not the rock star, but the man who had coordinated some of the most spectacular stunts in Clint's Western films back in the 70s. A Vietnam veteran who once told Clint that fear was just God's way of keeping good men alert. Without hesitation, Clint pulled over. As he approached Jim, memories flooded back. Memories of this man diving off horses, coordinating dangerous falls. Always with a smile and a "yes, sir," that came from years of military discipline. But the Jim before him now was different. His eyes carried a weight that hadn't been there before, and when he recognized Clint, his face showed not joy but shame. "Mr. Eastwood," Jim said, trying to stand straighter despite his circumstances, "you shouldn't see me like this, sir." "Cut the sir, Jim," Clint replied, his voice carrying the same quiet strength it had decades ago. "What happened to you?" Jim's next words sent a chill down Clint's spine. "They made sure I lost everything when I tried to tell the truth. They thought they could silence me, but they don't know what they're up against now." The sun had fully set now, casting long shadows on the street, but the darkness in Jim's eyes spoke of shadows far deeper. Shadows that Clint Eastwood was about to help bring into the light. That night, over coffee in a quiet diner, Jim's story unfolded. After his stunt work in Hollywood, he dedicated his life to helping fellow veterans through the American Heroes Legacy Alliance, one of the largest private organizations claiming to support military heroes returning home. But what he discovered there would change everything. "The alliance looked perfect on paper," Jim said, his hands trembling slightly as he pulled out a worn envelope from his duffel bag. Their CEO, Vincent Sterling, was all over media talking about supporting veterans, but something wasn't adding up in their numbers. Jim had noticed discrepancies. First, small ones. Money meant for veteran housing programs disappearing into offshore accounts, medical support funds being redirected to shell companies. But as he dug deeper, the rabbit hole went further than he could have imagined. Sterling was working with Marcus Green, a big shot in Hollywood production. Jim continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. They were using the alliance as a front and laundering money through fake veteran support programs, while real heroes were sleeping on the streets. When Jim tried to report internally, things got ugly. Suddenly, his spotless reputation was tarnished by manufactured scandals. Old friends in the industry stopped returning his calls. His bank accounts were frozen due to suspicious activity. Even his military pension became tied up in endless bureaucratic red tape. "But you kept evidence," Clint said, his eyes fixed on the envelope. Jim nodded, pulling out documents, photographs, and USB drives. "They thought they got everything when they raided my house, but they didn't know about my old military training. Always have a backup plan. Always secure your intel." The evidence was damning. Photos of Sterling at private meetings with shell company executives, internal memos about redirecting veteran support funds. But what caught Clint's attention was a list of names, veterans who had tried to speak up before Jim, each one systematically destroyed. "Sterling's got everyone fooled," Jim said, his voice heavy with both anger and exhaustion. "He shows up at veteran events in his expensive suits, shaking hands, making promises. Meanwhile, The real money's going to his friend Green's production company, laundering millions while Viter... Jim's voice cracked, and for a moment, the proud veteran looked away, gathering himself. When he turned back, there were tears in his eyes, but also a fierce determination. You know what's worse than being homeless, Clint? Watching your brothers suffer, while the vultures profit from their pain. I lost everything trying to expose them, but I'd do it again. Some things are worth losing everything for. Clint's jaw tightened as he looked through the documents, the same sense of duty that had driven him during his military service stirring in his chest. But before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Mr. Eastwood, you're a respected man. Don't let an unstable veteran ruin your reputation. Some stories are better left untold. Clint Eastwood had faced many challenges in his life, but this one felt different. This wasn't about making movies or winning awards. This was about something he understood deep in his bones, the sacred bond between those who serve. His first call was to Sarah Martinez, an investigative journalist he'd met during a film premiere. Unlike many modern reporters chasing viral stories, Sarah was old school, more interested in truth than tweets. When Clint shared Jim's evidence with her, her eyes lit up with the fire of someone who just discovered buried treasure. This isn't just about money, Sarah said, spreading the documents across her desk. These shell companies, they're connected to at least 3 other veteran support organizations. If what Jim's saying is true, we're looking at systematic exploitation on a massive scale. But when Clint started asking questions, the pushback was immediate. His agent called first. The studio's nervous, Clint. They're saying this could affect distribution deals. Maybe it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. Then came the meeting with studio executives. The conference room felt cold despite the California heat outside. Marcus Green wasn't there, but his influence was. Think about your legacy, one executive said, his concern clearly rehearsed. Do you really want your last big headline to be about chasing conspiracy theories? Clint's response was pure Eastwood. My legacy? My legacy is standing up for what's right, just like every veteran who ever served this country. Sarah's investigation started uncovering more veterans, each with a similar story. John Baker, former Marine, fired from a security job after questioning the Alliance's spending. Michael Chun, Army medic, suddenly facing audit after audit when he started compiling donation records. Each story made Clint's resolve stronger, but it was a visit from 2 veterans living in their cars that really hit home. Both had tried to access the Alliance's housing program, only to be tangled in endless paperwork while their resources drained away. Mr. Eastwood, one of them said, guys like Sterling, they count on us being too broken to fight back. But we're not broken. We're just waiting for someone to stand with us. As Clint left his office that evening, he noticed a black SUV following him. His phone kept getting anonymous calls, but instead of fear, he felt something else. The same quiet determination he'd known at Fort Ord, the certainty that comes with knowing you're on the right side of the fight. Then came the news that would change everything. Someone from inside the Alliance wanted to talk. Someone who had been watching, waiting, and gathering evidence of their own. The benefit event at the Hollywood Veterans Center was Clint's idea. If they want to fight, fight in the shadows, he told Sarah. Let's drag them into the light. What he didn't expect was how quickly Vincent Sterling would take the bait. Sterling arrived in his $1,000 suit, all cameras and smiles, shaking hands with veterans while his PR team hovered nearby. He even had the nerve to approach Clint. Mr. Eastwood, what an honor. I've always admired how you portrayed military men in your films. Such dignity, such respect. Clint's response was measured, each word carrying the weight of decades in front of cameras. Respect isn't what you say, Mr. Sterling. It's what you do. But Sterling wasn't done. He brought his own media team, ready to announce the Alliance's new veteran restoration program. $10 million in housing and medical support, he claimed. The cameras ate it up. What Sterling didn't know was that Jim had spent the previous week connecting with other veterans through his old military networks. As Sterling took the podium, they started arriving, dozens of them, not shouting, not causing a scene, just standing silently at the back of the room, each wearing their service caps, each carrying folders with documentation. The first hint of trouble came when Sarah Martinez started asking questions, about specific veterans by name. Sterling's practiced smile flickered. Then more reporters joined in, armed with details that could only have come from someone inside the Alliance. That's when it happened. A screech of tires outside, a dark SUV, two men rushing toward the entrance. Jim, who had been watching from the sidelines, recognized the pattern from his combat days. "Clint, get down." Jim's tackle carried them both behind a pillar just as the accident was supposed to happen. A heavy lighting rig crashing down exactly where Clint had been standing. The safety cable had been cut. In the chaos that followed, Sterling tried to slip away, but he didn't get far, because waiting at the exit was Linda Chun, the Alliance's own chief financial officer, carrying a laptop full of records she'd been secretly keeping for years. "You think veterans are too broken to fight back?" she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "My brother was a Marine. He died waiting for support that was promised in your press releases. That money went to your offshore accounts instead. The cameras weren't just rolling now. They were live streaming." Sterling's face had lost its practiced polish. But before it could respond, another voice cut through the tension. "Tell them about Operation Silent Fall, Vince." Everyone turned. There in the doorway stood James Morrison, not looking homeless anymore, but clean-shaven, in his old service uniform, ribbons and all. And beside him, a man whose presence made Sterling's face go white. "Hello, brother," the man said. "Remember me?" The man who walked into the room was Colonel David Sterling, Vincent's older brother, a decorated Vietnam veteran who'd been listed as MIA since 1972. But he wasn't missing anymore. He'd been right here in Los Angeles, homeless, one of the countless veterans the Alliance had turned away. "You told everyone I was dead." David's voice carried the weight of decades of betrayal. It was convenient, wasn't it? The hero brother who gave his life for his country. Great story for fundraising. Vincent Sterling's composed facade cracked completely. "David, you don't understand. After what happened to you in Vietnam, your PTSD, you weren't fit to manage the family foundation. I had to protect." "Protect what?" David cut in. "The money? The reputation? While real heroes were suffering. You and your Hollywood friend Green turned our family's veteran foundation into your personal piggy bank." Linda Chin stepped forward, her laptop open. "We have the numbers, Mr. Sterling. Every diverted donation, every fake program, every veteran denied help while you funneled money to Green's production companies." The room had fallen silent. Cameras captured every moment as Vincent Sterling, the man who built his reputation on helping veterans, faced a brother he betrayed. "You used my name," David continued, his voice breaking slightly. "My sacrifice to hurt the very people we swore to help." That's when Marcus Green burst in with his lawyers, but he was too late. Sarah Martinez's team was already broadcasting live. The documents were already being shared. The truth was out. Jim Morrison stepped forward, standing tall beside his fellow veterans. "You thought we were too broken to fight back, but you forgot something. We're trained to never leave a man behind." Vincent Sterling made one last attempt to regain control. "These are troubled veterans with mental health issues. Their accusations—" "Stop right there." Clint Eastwood's voice cut through the room like a steel blade. "I've spent my life telling stories, Mr. Sterling. I know a real hero when I see one, and I know a coward when I see one too." The evidence was overwhelming. Linda Chen's records, Sarah's investigation, the testimonies of dozens of veterans. But it was David Sterling's presence that dealt the final blow. The hero brother, not dead in Vietnam, but alive and abandoned by the very foundation created in his name. As federal agents began arriving, tipped off by Sarah's team, Vincent Sterling and Marcus Green watched their empire crumble. But they still didn't understand what had hit them. They never understood that some bonds go deeper than money. Some loyalties can be broken. The question on everyone's lips: how had they kept David Sterling hidden all these years? The answer would shock everyone in the room, especially Clint Eastwood himself. The truth was both simpler and more powerful than anyone expected. David Sterling hadn't been alone all these years. A network of veterans, including Jim Morrison, had been protecting him, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to expose the truth. After Vietnam, Jim explained to a stunned audience, David found out what his brother was doing with the foundation. But Vincent had too much power, too many connections. So David did what soldiers do. He adapted, survived, and planned. Every veteran Vincent turned away, we tried to help. Every piece of evidence we collected, we just needed someone with the courage and influence to help us bring it all to light. That's when David Sterling turned to Clint. When Jim told me you'd stop to help him that day, I knew our wait was over. In Hollywood, they call you a legend, Mr. Eastwood, but among veterans, you're something more important. You're a brother who never forgot what that means. The aftermath was swift. Vincent Sterling and Marcus Green faced federal charges. The alliance's board was dissolved, its assets frozen. But more importantly, a new organization emerged from the ashes. The David Sterling Veterans Trust, run by veterans for veterans, with transparency and accountability at its core. Lindichin became its first CEO, with Jim Morrison heading veteran outreach. Their first action, creating a nationwide network of veteran support centers staffed by veterans who understood what their brothers and sisters were going through. David Sterling, no longer hiding, dedicated himself to counseling veterans with PTSD, turning his own struggles into a source of hope for others. Sometimes, he would say, the greatest victory isn't defeating the enemy. It's helping another soldier find their way home. As for Clint Eastwood, he did what he'd always done. He kept working, kept directing, kept telling stories that mattered. But now, every film set he ran had a special program for hiring veterans, giving them a chance to rebuild their lives in the industry he loved. The story made headlines, but the real impact was in the lives changed. Veterans who'd been living in their cars found homes. Those struggling with PTSD found understanding. Those who'd lost hope found purpose. 1 year later, at the opening of the first David Sterling Veteran Center, Clint Eastwood stood before a crowd of veterans and their families. His words were few but powerful. In our industry, we talk a lot about heroes. We put them on screen, write them into scripts. But real heroes? They're not found on movie sets. They're found in the men and women who put on a uniform and risk everything for their country. And when those heroes need help, we don't write scripts, we take action. Jim Morrison, now clean-shaven and wearing a suit, stood beside him. The same proud stance, but now his eyes carry hope instead of despair. You know what Mr. Eastwood taught us? He asked the crowd. That it's never too late to do the right thing. That no hero should ever stand alone. And so, that's our story for today. A reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism happen not on battlefields, but in the quiet moments when one person chooses to stop, to care, to take a stand. If you've been moved by this story, remember there are veterans in your community right now who might need your help. Sometimes all it takes is the courage to stop and ask, "Are you okay, brother?" Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear more stories that remind us what true American values are all about. God bless you, and God bless America.